Okay, we're into another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really special review for you guys from the brand Seiko. A little about them. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And in terms of type of watch, of course, this is a dive watch. Some key characteristics inside what you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown. You're going to say that it's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is the Seiko Prospex SLA057 Marine Master 200, and it is essentially a modern reinterpretation of Seiko's original saturation diver, the 6159, which was an upgrade from the short-lived 6215-7000. The interesting thing about this particular line is it would later on go to inspire what we all know as the Marine Master 300 line. So this whole design aesthetic is very of course intrinsic and organic to Seiko's lineage and their design philosophy, and this is just an outstanding example of that, guys. This is unfortunately a limited edition, but man, it's gorgeous. You can get this for $3,550 pre-owned from Belmont Watches in San Diego. And I have to say, this is, again, just so gorgeous. 600 pieces, so truly limited, ever brilliant steel. And man, just this gilded layout is absolutely breathtaking. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, big shout out of course to channel sponsors Belmont Watches for providing this gorgeous piece in for review. One thing I will mention is it also does come on a beautiful Seiko Seichu textile strap, which is still looks brand new and is inside the wrapping. But what I'll do is I'll focus with it on this nice silicone chocolate bar period correct style strap. But man, let's just take a look at this dial. Something that just jumps out at me is that in pictures it looks black, but I will say in reality it definitely has more of a gray tone, which I think looks fantastic. But ultimately can also pick up some warmth and some bronze-ish tones thanks to, of course, the gilt layout. Now, another thing you'll notice in terms of fine details that set this apart from your, your average Seiko diver, even look at the end cap on the hand stack. Gorgeous. I mean, this thing is absolutely grand Seiko level, and there's really no arguing it from the movement that's inside, which is an 8L35, which is of course based on the Grand Seiko 9S movement. It's just going to be, not regulated to as tight a tolerance, and it's not going to have as much additional decoration on it, but still finished to a very high level. But getting into some of the details here, guys. 42.6 millimeters in diameter, 13 millimeters thick, 49.2 millimeters lug to lug, ever brilliant steel, brushed Enzaratsu polished, and my goodness, this thing is gorgeous. Of course, this is pre-owned, so there's going to be a bit of wabi-sabi you're going to notice there in the finish, but man, it wears it well. Goodness. This is a handsome watch. And again, this was on my Grail list. I almost got this instead of my SLA017. This was on the list in terms of ones to consider. And if I didn't find the amazing deal that I did on that SLA017, this could have ended up being the crowning jewel of my collection, which would have totally like rerouted every other watch that came after that, which is very interesting to kind of think about the ripples that could have created. But this is definitely one that I appreciate and I can see as an absolute grail for many collectors. Now it does have a beautiful dual curved sapphire with an inner AR coating, which is super clear, so you're not going to get a lot of hints. I think right here at this angle you can almost get a hue of purple tone there, but it's not going to be overwhelming or overpowering, which is nice. Now getting into some more of the details, guys. Unidirectional rotating bezel. Ooh, very nice, and definitely a step above. It's still as smooth as you would expect for Seiko, just has a more more pronounced click to it. Typically Seikos are going to err on the smoother side, less clicky. This has some nice clicks to it, which I can appreciate. And of course, the bezel grip is very nice. In terms of the alignment, guys, you can see there, that's about as good as it gets. maybe not even any play, but that thing just backs right on to that, perfectly aligned there with that chapter ring. So really, really fantastic. Crown, of course, screw down, unsigned. That's part of the kind of Prospex, nature and their layout. They don't really do signed crowns unless it's some type of special edition. You guys can see here, really gorgeous. Again, limited edition, to 600 pieces. This thing is immaculate. Let me give it actually a quick little wipe here just to get some of the fingerprints off, just so you guys can enjoy some of that finishing. Even on the underside, the finishing is really nice. Check that out. Look at how clean that is. Also, one thing you'll notice is it actually has a recessed wave pattern here, which typically sticks out, and that's something they do to create a bit more thinness. So that goes unnoticed and appreciated. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't notice that they had it, the wave recessed, which typically it used to stick out, and people always want to get a little bit more ultimately thin. So I think that's really nice and thoughtful, little detail there. So the movement to 8L35, 50-hour power reserve, smooth 4 Hz sweep, or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of the beat rates. The case back you guys saw, solid and etched, with a nice little stamp in the middle. Getting to the dial, guys, you have these beautiful raised indices that do have an additional level of finish there. You guys can see some beautiful, they are just nice and tall, beautifully done. And of course, part of Seiko and their Prospex is they really put function first. Let's give it a quick little dust off here. So when you do have something like this, typically these are going to be punched through the back, but finished to such a high level that you can't even really notice it. So pretty amazing. And of course, that way, no matter what level of shock, you don't have to worry about anything falling out of the dial in terms of any of those indices and those appliques. So very tough. And again, it's more of a conscious decision. One thing also to note is a lot of places will actually advertise this as a ceramic bezel insert. Now, the insert itself does use ceramic, but it's not solid ceramic, which is interesting because in Seiko's lower end watches, they'll use a standard ceramic insert. Just so you guys know, though, the more I've looked into it, on their higher end options, they don't use a standard ceramic. What they do is they'll use a steel bezel insert and use a ceramic coating, essentially. So they're going to get the scratch benefits of ceramic, but you're not going to have any of the cracking issues, because you'll be able to bend and have some give to it if, heaven forbid, you get a really tough strike on there. So very interesting. I haven't seen, any of these bezels destroyed or anything like that. So, the fact that they do it for the cheaper ones, I would say that this would be considered, at least by their technical standards, which we all know Seiko is very serious, especially when it comes to, anything within the ISO standards and being compliant. So I would say that this is probably going to be the best option for you to get that glossy ceramic look, but also having to not worry about the shattering, cracking issues when you have something as hard as a ceramic. So I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. And again, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that's posted. Even on Seiko sites themselves, they can be quite ambiguous. But from everything that I've read, these are steel bezel inserts that do have a coating that contains a ceramic element that gives it the shine. Typically, they were doing some really cool lacquered work before that, I think did wonderful, but I guess this new ceramic update, in terms of adding that to it, helps with those hairline scratches and whatnot. Now, getting into, of course, the dial, some of you have already noticed the 4.5 o'clock date, and that's going to upset some people. It is what it is, guys, but you know what? It kind of disappears, and when it is dark, it disappears completely, and you're just left with a beautifully legible dial. And it is nice to have the date to keep track of your weeks, or even for dive timing, you're filling out a logbook, you're going to want to put the date on there. Come on, let's be honest, guys. So, of course, you're going to have these brushed and polished hands, which are really beautifully done, and again finished to an extremely high level. And Seiko Lumibright, of course, this is Divers 200 meters water resistance, which is posted there. And for it to do that, that means it needs to meet or exceed those ISO standards to carry that text. So you can definitely rest assured that as long as your crown is screwed down, you'll be good to go in terms of water resistance. Now you have this black silicone strap in that iconic chocolate bar pattern. Silicone for me, not the greatest, just because it can be a bit sticky in terms of, not when it's wet, it can be quite slick, which is nice, but when it's dry, unfortunately, it can get like dust and lint kind of attracted to it. But thankfully, this has a 20 millimeter lug width, and they're drilled, so you can just put this on a traditional Tropic, an ISO frame, or any other strap, you know, that you find that you think will fit the aesthetic. Even I would probably put this on a really nice sailcloth, like a black Artem loopless sailcloth. That would be really outstanding. So that's if I owned it, and that would be the plan. And I'd probably go between that and a traditional Tropic strap, and those would just be gorgeous. I feel like, though, the sailcloth would tie into the luxury feel here, and that's exactly what this is. This is a luxury diver. Of course, it can be used as a tool, but this is a... Oh, you lay this on a table at a watch meet next to other watches. This is gonna blow your typical Oris out of the water. This is going to be right up there again with more luxury facets from Rolex, from Omega, from Glasuit Original. So there's this, again, is just to a whole higher echelon in terms of those details, which not everybody appreciates in a tool watch, but for some of us that are collectors, absolutely do appreciate. So again, this also does come with that Seichu fabric strap, which is gorgeous, a little thick, so you know, a lot of people don't necessarily wear them. They like the way they look. Photograph with it, maybe wear it, you know, again, for a couple of wristwatch checks, but you end up probably just leaving it in the box. But with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears beautifully. Of course, my wrist isn't super flat and wide, so it's not like it's going to accommodate to every single watch. But if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion. This thing is going to feel a lot bigger than it really is. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low here, and then I'll just tighten up the frame so you guys can still get a detailed look, but maybe just keeping within a truer aspect ratio of how this might lay on your own wrist. And you can see beautifully centered, guys. These lines just flow, and it really does an amazing job, you know, really melting away that 13 millimeter thickness. And 13 millimeters isn't, you know, it's not super substantial in terms of the thickness. 13 millimeters is a good thickness, but man, it just feels so much thinner. Look at that. And then of course that beautiful undercut, just offsetting that polished bevel. Just absolutely gorgeous, guys. This is a looker. Whew. How it's not in my collection, it's tough. I look at this, man, there's just something about the warmth, something about the gilt tones. It just impresses me a whole lot. And that ever brilliant steel is so bright, so much character. You know, almost more reminiscent of a platinum in terms of the whiteness and the brightness, versus, you know, if you get something like, let's say, a titanium, it's going to be even darker and dimmer than steel. So this is cool. And then of course, it's not just for looks, it's actually, you know, way more corrosion resistant than your standard stainless steel. So whew, this is a looker, all right. But with that said, let's go ahead, get it off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, yes. It is a Seiko Diver with dive watch loom. That is potent, guys. I would say maybe the bezel pip, although it is nice in terms of its size and scale, not quite as bright. But everything else, though, I mean, it's definitely going to be at what you would expect, especially from something, you know, a premium version of a Seiko Diver. And this is absolutely within that, again, premium space. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field. enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what those colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. Whew, this is a looker, guys. Maybe you'd include a bit of harsh lighting where we can come in and typically, try to expose any types of production defects. But all you're going to see here is, a little wear and tear on that beautiful Zaratsu polishing, which you can see here, still quite lustrous. And again, it really depends on the lighting situations. Of course, if you go looking for imperfections, you're going to find them, guys. But in this case, you're going to just find more and more little details and little nuances to love. And you can notice that dial becomes quite chocolatey. Look at that. Depending on the lighting situation, a lot of those grays warm up and become very much deeper and more bronze-like. So very cool. Of course, it all plays off of that gilded, accented theme there, which dates back to that original 6159 that inspired the game in terms of being a saturation diver. No, this is not a 300-meter water-resistant watch, but does it really need to be? It would be nice in terms of kind of ranking and just all those little nuances we use to try to justify the expenses for the things that we love. But in reality, guys, the 200 versus 300 meters, you're not doing 200 meters anyway. You're going to be recreationally diving closer to about 40 meters. But man, this thing is absolutely gorgeous, and it just carries on all of those key attributes that we've come to just associate with Seiko as a brand that we really love. And you can see again, depending on the lighting situation, black dial. So super cool, super versatile. Closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, super wearable. It screams quality to a Grand Seiko-like level. In terms of model variants, this is also, so there's this model, which is the 5.7, and I believe there's the 5.5 that has the textured dial, kind of the blue playing motif there instead of the gilt. And they even came out with some, I believe, a US exclusive or two that have a bracelet, but I think they're not in Ever Brilliant Steel. And they changed some of the details. You don't get the cool hand stack cap, so things are dialed down a little bit in terms of some of the cost saving, but also those watches are priced lower and also different in terms of their availability. This being again super limited 600 piece run versus your typical even if they run for a couple years, that's going to be a couple of thousand. So guys, comparable models. You think, of course, of the Prospex SPB Marine Master 200 reduced line, which can be had for closer to $1,000, give or take, depending on the model and the condition. Those are 42 millimeters by 12.5 millimeters thick, with a 48 millimeter lug to lug, so they're going to be slightly smaller, slightly more compact, and they're going to be the standard 316L stainless steel, brushed and polished. You're going to get the Dia Shield coating, but the movement is going to be the Seiko 6R35 versus the 8L35, so you'll get an extended power reserve at 70 hours, but you're going to be getting only a 3 hertz beat rate or 21,600 vibrations per hour, and also you're going to have a wider tolerance in terms of the daily deviation. Again, that's the tolerance. That's not the average. That's not what you're likely to get, but it's going to have a wider tolerance. This is going to be a slightly tighter tolerance. These things are pretty outstanding. I mean, just look at that sweep. Just the hand. There's so many details I love about this piece, guys. So bottom line, this is one of the most luxurious feeling Seiko divers I've ever experienced. And although it is expensive, again, for a quote-unquote Seiko diver, it's actually one of the cheapest luxury divers on the market if you think about it. I mean, this holds its own. You put it next to a Blancpain 50 Fathoms. There's a level of care, there's a level of detail, there's a level of history and lore. Now, can other brands, younger brands, come out with really competitive watches with great specs? Sure. And they can even finish them to a very high level. They're going to charge you a lot too. But they're not going to be as in-house. They're not going to have the lineage. They're not going to have the history. So again, that's something where those heavy hitters and those bigger, European, Swiss brands, That's where they play, and that's why they charge such high premiums. And I think sometimes just because it is only a Seiko on the dials, this model can be a little underappreciated in terms of the level of fit, the level of finish, the level of execution, the history, the lore, the care over years and years and years of little iterations to change and remix and rework this beautiful signature design aesthetic to Seiko. This is intrinsically Seiko. This is not an homage to something else or anything else out on the market. There are homages to this, and there's something special about that. So with that said, let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.